Gone. It's gone live. We're live.
Mm.
So this is
Yeah, live. Hi, Vance.
Yep. That's Alexander Hayes in Canberra, Australia, and I'm Vance Stevens in Al Ain, United Arab Emirates. And every now and then, used to be once a week, but now it's more like bi-weekly. Um, I have something I call Learning Together, and we're in episode 341 now. So if you do some math, you'll figure out that's started back in 2010. And amazingly, back in 2010, I was teaching a course in multiliteracies, and I asked Alex to pop by and talk to the people there, because also I was interested in what he was doing. He was doing something called Streamfolio at the time, and we wanted to learn more about it. It seemed innovative, as Alex's things usually are. And so that turned out to be episode number 3 of Learning Together. And back then, who would have thunk that we'd both still be here? Alex at the end of a 6-year research project, which he proposed back in 2010. And it was at that session which he sent the link, and it was at the archive address, which is on the Learning Together website and also at webheadsinAction.org/live. There's a link to that episode, which has a link to your dissertation submission application, which makes very interesting reading. And so that's pretty much what I know about your dissertation, apart from the fact of having participated in it in one of the phases. It's a 5-phase project, and I'm not sure if I was in phase 2 or 3 or where I was exactly, but in any event, Alex has been interviewing quite a lot of people, getting data from people who wear geolocatable, body wearable communication devices, such as Google Glass or other wearable devices. And so, anyhow, that's where. Just one more thing I like to mention. I like to say this is August 14th, 2016. I like to root ourselves in time in these events. So 6 years after we first talked with Alex in a live broadcast, here we are back again. So welcome.
Thanks, Vance. I'd like to firstly acknowledge that I'm meeting tonight with you, with all of you that see this true of the Ngunnawal people here in Canberra, Australia, where I am. I pay my respects to the past, present, and future elders that will be in this place. I also pay my respects to the Nigna people of the Kimberley region of Western Australia, which is up in the top of Australia. My kuya, or my 3 Aboriginal mothers, have recently given me an Aboriginal name, that being Malgai. And this has occurred between when I began this PhD and this present evening. So that's been a very significant thing for me along this journey of what some people would see to be technological singularity. And tonight I'd like to tease that apart and with you, Vance, sort of recollect part of the journey, learning, and also to share this as an informal PhD presentation. It's uncanny, Vance, because my partner has recently been to the Nulungu Centre in Broome and presented her formal dissertation presentation, which is necessary when doing any form of research. And so this is one of a number of presentations to bring back to the people that have engaged with me through my research journey, some of the things that I've discovered and learned, and it's with great respect that great privilege that I'm here with you tonight, Vance. Thank you.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier. We just came on and just kind of warmed up earlier. In fact, actually, we haven't actually started. We haven't reached the time where we said we would start this podcast. We just decided to go off for 15 minutes, come back and just start talking. And if people want to join us, they'll come in the middle of it. But
they will.
It's kind of interesting to let's see. I suppose I met a lot of you people virtually through Barbara Dew, possibly, or through Michael Coughlin. Michael Coughlin has been He's a good friend of mine. And somebody I've known personally. He came and visited me. He and I went and hung out with Barbara for some time in Brazil. Stayed with her for a couple of weeks, and she was over there. I think you met her there as well. She stayed with you, did she?
That's right.
Yeah.
She stayed with us. Yeah, she stayed with us up in Orange, New South Wales, Australia. Yeah.
Yeah. So from that,
She did.
I sort of feel like I know a lot of you guys. Lee Blackall gave a kind of a keynote talk or a plenary talk or whatever we called it at the Webheads in Action online convergences that we ran for 3 years running. We had George Siemens on as a speaker 1 year. We had Stephen Downes as a speaker. These people are instrumental in the connectivist theory that underpins, or did underpin anyway, in 2010 your research. Somewhere these mental loci are all coming together, in that we've been sort of on the same wavelength as far as that approach to technology is concerned. So and how it impacts education and what what drives us as far as learning ourselves as professionals, learning from peers, and also, of course, translating that into teaching our students. So it's very interesting, the things that you said. You just started you had the POV conference, which I was following at that time through podcasts. I was listening to a lot of podcasts in the World Bridges Network, and I was kind of connecting with a lot of educators at a time when that was, Jeff LeBeau and Dave Cormier were going strong in EdTech Talk. And it was just interesting to connect with educators and learn so much actually about the point of view technology, the POV technology that was being applied in the vet sector, vocational education sector in Australia, and listening from many different perspectives about how people were applying that in an area which is very vast. And of course, obviously, you need to reach people in order to train them or to have them report what they're doing or be supervised, remotely. So, and then and you went on to discuss at that conference and beyond a lot of the impacts of the sociological impacts of having technologies that would locate the privacy issues involved in the information that our cell phones and devices are, the Internet of Things that we have around us all the time is putting out about us. Maybe you'd like to address that a little bit.
Yeah.
With respect to your discussion.
Sure. Absolutely. It makes me smile, Vance, because for a vast number of years, essentially a decade of my life, I had more friends online than I ever had in a face-to-face context at all. I grabbed Lee Blackall and Michael Coughlin and a number of other people that I worked with professionally, but I must say that I was seemingly connected with hundreds of people online for a long period of time. So those occasions and the power of what they meant at the time and what they do mean now largely inform the nature of this research that I conducted. As you mentioned there, the preliminary title of the PhD of location-enabled body-worn technologies with respect to the education sector. And I recall at the time, the key question that came up in my mind, which triggered my whole idea to be doing a PhD, was to look at what are the socio-technical implications of this technology. How can it be used for good? How can it be used in such a way that it could be expediency, efficiencies? How could it realize profits for organizations? How could it shortcut a whole range of things that were being done, which largely were being taught from active, and yet a person who was online or in an online location could not pick that skill up. They have to watch hours and hours and hours and hours of video to be able to pick that skill up and practice that themselves with that physical skill. So that's really where it was born. The idea was born in 2004 which seems like an awfully long time ago, when I observed a large haul pack driver mechanic. It was a person who could, so big, so ginormous that essentially could stand under the truck fully stretched out and with ease work on various component parts of this truck. Now, that wasn't of any real consequence, except then I realized he was wearing some form of mobile camera. Then it was strapped to his head, and it was very rudimentary. It was a web camera connected by a cord to a set of safety glasses and a DVR recorder, digital video recorder. And he produced a series of videos, which he then Bluetoothed to his students when Bluetooth, you know, was just being formed in that time. It's just this connection between one device and another. So I said to you earlier, Vance, I came from a history of the prior decade working with research into the use of mobile technologies such as the mobile phone, across the vocational education training sector, but also kids that were largely disconnected from mainstream education. So the nature of my research, I wanted to be able to not only to connect with students and learners and adults through technology, but also to use those technologies in a way that would produce point of view, first-person perspective, expert evidence of having undertaken a skill. Connect that and have the management system, and that learning management system would then allow assessment and allow virtual connection to learners out in the field in rural and remote locations. I was largely at the time located-based locations, but traveling to remote and rural locations. That was 2000 and 2008, 2007, and then along came 2006, which I'm going backwards a little bit. I met that same person I met underneath the truck. We formed a company, and with the help of his brother and a range of other people from my network, including yourself, we formed a company that supplied these technologies and explored these technologies in a technological looking at the impact that may have across organizational change, and also looking at perhaps the possibilities that it could be used on industry and across a whole range of different key stakeholders sectors. The company was quite successful. We connected with 147 different large vocational educators to higher education sectors, and then I went across to private industry, and before we knew it, we were swamped with all sorts of possibilities and case studies to conduct. 2009, as a company, we decided that we would run a conference, and the conference would gather together everybody across the Australian vocational education training sector and industry, including the federal police, marine, military service, fire, and emergency services personnel, a whole range of people from different sectors, including bricklaying, everybody. And we had a large conference for that sector group, 160 people. And I invited one individual to come and speak. I didn't know Katina Michael at the time, Associate Professor Katina Michael. And Associate Professor Katina Michael got up on the podium as a plenary speaker. And generally, a plenary speaker at that would wrap up the couple of days' events and moral everyone how well they were doing within the sector itself. Katina got up and presented a profound series of slides and spoke about this idea of socio-ethical impact of these technologies on society. I remember feeling at the time rather pissed off with this person for having got up and spoilt what I thought was the conference, and yet was in actual fact it was the beginning of a journey for me. I said to her at the time, on that evening, I know nothing about the socio-ethical impact that you're talking about, but I think that it must be very important, given the amount of attention that it's received from everybody in the room here, who've all come and spoken to me and said that they thought that your presentation was rather contentious. So I'd like, if I could, to undertake a PhD with you and your engineering and information sciences faculty. And she said with an outright, there's no, not at all. And it wasn't without due consideration of her husband that that I went away and I wrote for 40 days straight. Why I thought it was important for me to better understand what this technology might mean and a socio-ethical impact on society. And when you, which is that first application, it's so naive, it's incredible. It is often the case when you first write these sorts of things. And but it was submitted, and there was no, it was accepted with no revisions, which was quite surprising to me. I received a letter in the mail in 2010, and it states, you know, that Alexander Hayes, you've been accepted into this to the engineering faculty, and you know, you'll present to the PhD to the postgraduate office and go on with it. Everything markedly. So fast forward a bit, just for a moment, to the final title of the PhD at the moment as it sits, and it will be published as, the title that it sits with now, which has been changed, 2 revisions has been changed through time, through over 6 years. It's now the socio-ethical implications of worn video recorders, and it's an ethnographic study. So essentially, the PhD process for a lot of people, they won't, who may not understand that process, you need to come up with a key question. And the key question for me was and still is, what are the socio-ethical implications of this technology broadly? Education sector is just one sector, just one stakeholder, as I discovered. There's 9 chapters in there: an introduction, a literature review, the research design, the methodology, about where wearable technologies come from and where we're going, perhaps. I decided to do 66 interviews, and those interviews are worldwide. I ran a conference, so I've got a chapter called Conference. I've got a chapter called Analysis, which I've done a lot of qualitative analysis on the data that I've collected. There's a discussion chapter and premise as to what the findings, and there's a conclusion. So really 9 chapters, pretty simple. Well, I've already written I think I've written probably 500,000 words already, and I haven't really got into the crux of writing that thesis. And sometimes theses are written, the actual exegesis or the written component, which is restricted to 100,000 words. It's a very small amount of words to try and summarize 7 intensive years of research around this innovation. And I see that the literature review, the main part at the beginning, it was an iterative process. It meant that I had to continually look at, investigate, identify, describe, annotate, and then look at all the themes that came out from the things that I discovered. So I worked through 11,000 online bookmarks I already had in Delicious and DIIGO, existing papers and documents prior on the topics of all of this. I looked at all the Taylor community threads, looked at all the Learning Together threads, I've looked at everything that we've been doing in the past, and also the future events. And those events are seminal in the beginnings of this idea of learning in a networked world. What does the future of learning in a networked world actually look like? I thought at the time, well, I'm going to be it. I'm going to be the investigative journalist, or I'm going to be an action researcher. I'm going to pretend that I'm the camera. And I did that, and I broke a lot of people's trust, and I also won a lot of people's admiration, but I also created a great deal of discord with a lot of people too who misinterpreted the nature of what my research was about at the time. And that's fine, because in time people will understand better as they reflect, particularly when this thesis is released. Because the thesis will be released as it is in a bound document and shoved in somebody. But I'm also releasing the data. The data is going to be released across the world in live. we live, the nature of transparency seems to be overbearing over privacy. So I have no fear as to the fact of the activities I got involved in, and a lot of them will be published live to the web, and a lot of them already are live. They're out there. So that literature review that I conducted, I went through sorts of databases everywhere, and I found a great deal of material that relates to between what we did, Vance, in those times, those formative times with Taylor and Future and with Webheads, where we looked at the technologies as a mechanism to connect with other people, to listen and to learn from those people, to perhaps to translate that back in our professional practice. Step a long way further than that period of time. I think you were about to say something there, Vance.
Well, yeah, I was. Well, you just touched on so many things where, you know, learning together in a networked world, for example, there's a wiki that it was people getting together actually physically annually, right? There was I think I joined in something in Thailand.
Yeah.
Helping schools, traveling around and meeting other educators and giving workshops and things like that. That's what we did in Thailand anyway. But yeah, that was a really nice movement. And you mentioned Webheads, of course, which is something that Michael Coughlin and I pioneered in 1998, which is still a viable community, as is teaching and learning online. We just sent a message. Well, you sent a message about your work in the Aboriginal communities, and the next message that was posted there, the next thread was the one inviting people to come here. We're kind of at an odd time, though, actually, because we're a little late for Australian, unless you're in Perth or something like that. And we're early for people in the United States. People usually join us. So, but anyway, that's okay. But and speaking of the time, it's just about now the time that people could be dropping in. You never know.
That's it.
The way we do this is Hangouts are kind of tricky. If you create an event for one, no one can ever really figure out how to get into the Hangout. So what I do is I post its link in a lot of places, everywhere but in the conversation for this Hangout, because I have had people come in, they'll find the event and then they'll find the link and then they'll come in. And I haven't really had any problem, but I realize that's really not a good idea to make that link public to everybody in the Google community. But I posted in Learning Together, the wiki. I posted at webheadsinAction.org/live, which is something that Jeff LeBeau set up for us long ago, in which whenever I do a Hangout, just kind of to respect him, I embed it there and kind of keep that going, because I appreciate the way he, you know, he's helped us in our networking, and then also, of course, I participated in your research, which is, I kind of feel like I was looking at parts of an elephant. You know, obviously there are a lot of parts that I wouldn't have known about, but it would be interesting to hear more about how the research you were conducting, you know, the parts that I could see, how that connected with the big picture, and also you mentioned in your admission application that there would be deliverables such as, for example, some of the collections to collect the media-rich examples of body-worn, location-enabled technology, whatever. It would be nice to know. You said a lot of that's online. Is it online where people can go and have a look now? Your 66 interviews are online in the YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's one example. What I found, Vance, was that the university plays funny tricks on people, and I can understand its motivations, but I think largely a lot of it a lot of it goes ignored in this current world. A university has a high degree of research ethics council. It has a council that basically oversees the research process, and your supervisor, like my supervisor, is responsible for overseeing me as a student and the research that I conduct, making sure that it meets with the ethical principles of that particular institution in relation to the cohort that you're interviewing or interacting with. Now, they do that because a lot of the times they conduct some pretty outrageous sort of research. You know, they might be looking at chopping things up or embedding things in people or testing people with different things, or there's all sorts of different types of research that people get involved in. And the research ethics process for me was the whole 8 months of my PhD. It was 8 months of toing and froing and so on, because I insisted on wearing the camera when I was interacting with people. I was audio recording people and asking them a series of prompts, a series of key questions, which served as the basis for a conversation. But we often went off the tangent. We went off on another journey. I interviewed people who were science fiction writers, the head of Google, head of Microsoft Research. I interviewed people in Northern European Data Union. I interviewed people in Toronto University. I interviewed people right out in the back end of Burke in Australia. So I was interviewing people from a whole diverse range of places and spaces across 3 different continents. That took me on a huge journey. I actually was a visiting researcher in Finland, in Aalto University, and that's my co-supervision point. And a lot of the data, all of the photos and data and so on, I have up in Flickr. I've got up in archive.org. There's a series of videos that I'm going to release through YouTube that were taken at various times and dates. But it has been a very baffling, deep feeling inside myself, Vance, where I've thought about it very, very clearly. I've often got to the points, as you may have seen, where I feel that I don't want to breach the trusts that I had with people at the time who said, no, I don't want to be recorded. Or a number of times, if you're recording me, that's fine, as long as it doesn't go to the internet. There's a whole range of those that I can't. Then there's a series of people that said, oh, you can publish anything you like. I've got nothing to hide. I said, okay, that's fine. Well, I'll interact with you as I am. And then a whole series of people that alerted me to say, you know, if you've got nothing to hide, well, then largely if you're not worried about what you're writing, then you've got nothing to say. It's like a Edward Snowden sort of, you know, situation. So I've had to be very careful, because some of the things I did record are incredibly contentious. In as much as those individuals were pointing at a time and encouraging me to look at this, what Foucault would say, you know, is the panoptica, is looking at the nature of how we as a society have over a decade ostensibly given permission for everything to be surveillance. Everything is surveillance. We go into it, all our environments are just about in surveillance. There's cameras embedded in everything. So what I've had to do is weigh up those ethics principles and see where they overlap. And I think the key thing is here, around the 66 interviews that I took, about 50 of those, including your own, if we may say so, is going to be published live. You know, they will be published live as a transcript. My question, your answer. My question is your answer. In our interaction. Now, I've made sure that that was part of my PhD, that the actual interview and its transcript and what was said is not just a piece of research data and analysis with a series of diagrams that look at a theme. They'll be the words that you and I said back in 2012 when we talked. And for other people, they said, we don't agree to the recording of the audio part, but we will give you a lot of data that we think you should be reading, which I've been working through too. So this whole PhD process has taken me away from just one mono picture, looking at the educational sector and the use of these technologies, to looking at how this interacts with the surveillance technologies of the world, the nature of data, where data sciences interact with this, around cultures, where I got off the plane in Finland and interacted with my supervisor, who promptly told me to take the camera off, otherwise I wouldn't be welcome in the country, never mind in his own home. Things like that, very profound learnings that I wouldn't have otherwise discovered. So the nature of where data rests and where it is a big part of my PhD outcome. It looks at this nature of how we've surrendered, and perhaps some of the themes that I'm discovering are very much around, one of the key ones, as we thought might be, is privacy. The notions of privacy in different parts of the world are remarkably different. Also around transparency. In some parts of the world, it's insisted that your channel, your interaction in an electronic domain, is monitored, and it's monitored for your own safety. So we have to also, I've had to work through those sort of concepts that I had largely ignored or not thought were going to be part of my research. And I'll tell you how it happened, Vance. It's a very simple one. In 2010 to 2011, I was driving home with Jeff in a ute from Canowindra in the middle of New South Wales, Australia. It both dawned on us at the time, it both dawned on our thinking at the time, almost simultaneously. We both looked at each other and went, location? Hang on a second. Location is playing one of the biggest parts of the picture here that we've largely ignored. Now, the reason we'd ignored it is because at a technological perspective, we had not yet had access to the commercial versions. We had industry versions, but not commercial, rapidly distributed versions of wearable technology that was location tracked. We didn't have that. It wasn't quite there. We weren't quite there. And just as we saw the GoPro come out with, we started to watch across all of these different device types, location, GIS, the actual pinpointing location as to where people were at that given time, date, the exposure of the camera, everything started to triangulate. It all started to come together just at the same time, and it dawned to us. And I turned to my supervisor a few days later and I said, I think we've nailed it. I think I know where this is all heading. The location is going to play a massive part of this picture with the vocational education training sector, with triangulation of information in order for the accreditation, AQTF, under Australian Quality Training Framework, the standards around identifying where somebody was. And she turned to me and she said, yes, I wrote about that in 2005. So I went back to her papers and I started reading my supervisor's papers. But it horrified me, Vance, because she talked about location as the nature of a surveillance vehicle rather than one that expediently connected an altruistic sense of industry to a device type. So what I realized is that I needed, at the time in 2012 to 2013, exposure through her networks to the people that she knew in relation to how the GIS, the location-enabled part of the camera, what it meant in a more holistic sense. And I started to turn up to the inaugural research presentations by the Australian Police down in Melbourne. I went to a national crimes prevention hosted conference. I went to a surveillance society conference, and off it went. Federal Police, National Security, and I went on from there. So that was in 2012, and my life changed markedly, Vance. It changed a lot. It did change a lot. I suddenly looked at what people were saying in my network, and I started to think about, yeah, I mean, connectivism is a nice notion. Yeah, I mean, it's largely understood that, you know, of course we're going to have, if things are all networked and connected, that there's going to be an ism that comes out of that. And that describes what we're doing within a pedagogical framework. But there's another part to that. And it's one that I know that George Siemens, after many times of talking with him and Stephen Downes and so on, treated as an unsavory subject, the unsavory sharp end of the conversation that didn't particularly want to go there. Reason being is because they come from nations where largely that is hot topic. That means as soon as you start talking openly and publicly about those key topics, you are being looked at very, very quickly. Those keywords are also trawled and trolled and dug by various agencies, as we're doing right now. So that to me made me very aware that I was entering into an international consideration for location-enabled body-worn video recorders. And when I did so, and when I looked at these in an international context, I suddenly realized these cameras were being used in very, very contentious locations and spaces in relation to humanity, in terms of the militarial use of location-enabled cameras, in terms of the policing of nations using this technology, in terms of a whole range of areas I hadn't considered as to the gravitas, as to how deeply these technologies were being used. So what I decided to do was I decided to look at the stakeholder group differently. I decided to change under ethics, change my application entirely. And I started to consider what I had heard on the grapevine was about to come out, and that was Google Glass. Now, Google Glass did hit. Google Glass hit the world in a much bigger way than a lot of people not only realize or wish to acknowledge. And that is that a corporation undertook a massive research project by strapping a very, very long-term project surveillance device to their heads and conducted a colossal impact study research project, which stuck its heads into many tens of thousands of people's lives on an everyday basis, even right down to the very intimate connections they have with other people live on the net. So what it did was it essentially made people the camera. People refused after a period of time to take it off because they were lulled into a nice sense of connection with this corporation by the chimes that they could hear through the bone conduction audio in their head. And I decided to ask questions about that. And I wanted to know from the socio-ethical impact what they thought. And so I went away and I ran 50 interviews online, about an hour each. Some of them are very insightful into a person's life, and also into the corporation that was distributing these. So for a cool $1,500 US, you could go and get outfitted in a nice trendy booth by Google and have these things fitted to you. And essentially it's a camera that looks at your eye, your eyeball. There's the prism. There's a GIS, geolocation enabled feature. The battery's inside the back boot strap. And it's got an audio recorder that sits on top of the microphone on top of your eardrum. And the speaker is conducted through bone conduction through your head. Now, people like Noam Chomsky thought people were mad. These things there. That's it there. Yep. Yeah. There it is there.
Listening to all those interviews got me to, actually, I did it on an impulse. I was in the States. I couldn't buy them anywhere but the States.
States, yeah, that's right.
The United States. I had to be in the United States to have it delivered there. So, yeah. Anyway, what you're talking about is the little.
No, I'm just. It sends shivers up my spine because it kind of now provides a link across to another part of a conversation, which I think was the crux as to where I'm heading with my PhD. The device that you've got in your hand there, Vance, is an incredibly well-researched piece of technology. Individuals like Thad Starner, Professor Steve Mann, and a couple of others that you can find anywhere, but particularly those 50 glass explorers all describe very, very different experiences with that. Different forms of attachment, different forms of defense that they would have for other people. I interviewed one person that had been punched up in a bar because she was wearing them. I interviewed one person in there who was arrested for having worn them on her head as she was driving her car, because the police officer saw that there was a little tiny screen in there and thought that she was watching a video, which is illegal as you're driving.
And apparently that heads-up display is more, since it's hands-free heads-up display, and it doesn't really distract you as other things might. If you're, say, following, you got a phone with a GPS on it and you're trying to figure out where you're going, so that's better if the GPS is here.
Well, that's right. You can get into your car and then get out of your car and keep walking in life, and it's still steering you around. The corporation knows where you're being steered to and what you're being fed, and you start to have a direct link into an organization, and it's also got a direct link into you. That's if you choose to wear them all the time. That's what I heard. I was listening to this. You're listening. Now, I conducted those under my professional...
I listened to most of those, by the way.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Under the guise of my professional associate through the University of Canberra, I conducted those interviews. That didn't meet ethics approval through the university, because it largely would have been ignored. So I broke the rules in order to be able to get that snapshot of those various things. As I did back in 2010, I did a snapshot of a number of individuals using point-of-view video technology in a range of locations with their personal permission, but not with Ethics Council clearance, because I would not have been able to do it. They would have said no. Would have gone through a very long process to go through that. Anyway, the interviews in the PhD have gone through all of the strict protocols, and they are so insightful because of the people who are involved. Now, if you look at 2013, my supervisor said to me, Alex, what's of great interest to me is that this is not necessarily the naivety is where you are, but more around, I don't think we've actually fully grasped who the key players are here, who's driving this innovation, and as to why. You stumbled into it as a novice thinking that you could use it for exactly that, hands-free, you know, it's where you can record a video for an hour, it's usable as a teaching mechanism and so on, but there's a much bigger picture to that. And I'd like you to know more about the bigger picture. It's important you do. And it's important you do because at that time, I was watching my peers starting to outfit their children with them. They were starting to get glass and put it onto the kids of their heads, the heads of the children. And that's when it struck me that there's a much bigger implication here, and that is that I needed to know from key people as to what they thought if students turned up in their class or learning settings, whether that be remote or whether that be virtual or whether that be physical, what is their response to their client, if we're looking at it that way, now surveilling them in any way they wish and sending that data wherever they wish at any given time. It basically did away with architecture altogether in terms of the pedagogical referencing, and we moved into this architectures of participation that I wrote a paper on a long time ago. And what happened is I decided I would run a conference in Toronto, in the University of Toronto, and we drew together and brought together all the key players we thought at the time who were not only involved in this location no body-worn video recorder, police and so on, glass. We also brought in the life loggers. We also brought in the quantified self group movements. We brought in the artificial intelligence people. We brought in all of the people who are the key players who underpin the foundations for where this particular architecture came from, this particular device type came from. And what we found is that people like Interaxon and a number of others essentially were looking at, by putting a device on your head, you could control what happens elsewhere. By thinking, you start to change and control stuff. And we watched, from 2013 onwards, we've seen multiple examples of where humans connected to a machine can change and markedly control device types and other interfaces in completely foreign environments elsewhere, just by thinking about it, connecting and using that thinking mechanism of the brain to actually change and do things. You know, move an arm, robotic arm. We started to see a convergence. And it dawned on me then that there's something bigger than just connectivism. There's something called this whole idea of this this singularity.
Singularity, huh?
And 2013, I took off. I went to the Computer Freedom and Privacy Conference in Washington. I listened to Cory Doctorow talking about you know, DCMA, this digital you know, copyright machine type interface for our data, what was happening with that being controlled by corporations. And I realized when I'm at the Computer Freedom and Privacy Conference that the whole thing is actually sponsored by Facebook, you know, which is a paradox in its own right. then people were connected with that conference through Skype, and they are Northern European people, Northern European Data Union, and they just said, no, we don't want to participate there because it's got to do with the Yanks. And it really made it clear to me that there was a series of complete divides around how data was being treated in that time, and how people got access to information. And so I went on to the Toronto conference that we'd taken a year to put together, and I was pleasantly horrified, I suppose, when I went through those 3 days at the conference as the convener. I was an action researcher. I had ethics approval to wear not only a camera recorder, but an audio recorder. I recorded everything. I've got 22,000 photos of the whole interaction I had with everyone in there. And the thing about it is they did too. Everybody's recording everything. So the data chain is massive in there. And what it really brought home to me that we live in a surveillance society. That's it. People have become the infrastructure. People are the infrastructure. They're wearing it. By wearing the infrastructure, they are giving away location, date, time, exposure, everything. Everything is being given away to corporations who mine that data and use that information for different things at all. And so after I came back from 2000 from the conference, I'd come back from Finland and learning that, I had a huge meltdown. 2013, I crashed big time at the end of that. The company was, I don't know, 25K in the red. I had largely given up on from an ethical perspective, I no longer agreed with selling the gear any further. I didn't have anything to do with it. I suppose I had a complete revulsion for what we'd been doing. I rejected it and almost pulled out of the PhD altogether. And just saying, yes, so socioethically, it's going to have a profound impact. I'm not necessarily that interested in how, and I don't care. I just don't care anymore about it. I was absolutely worn out. I had been published in numerous books. I'd been interviewed so many times. I've completely forgotten about how many times I've been interviewed. I think I'd been reading and immersed in this area for so long and interviewing so many people and so on that I was just burnt out. And it often comes that way. Sometimes, as I've heard, through a PhD, so I've been told, many PhD students become divorced. Surprise, surprise. Many PhD students suffer significant medical issues as a result of their, immersion in their field of endeavor. And I experienced both of those. But I also experienced a very profound new one, which I had least expected. And that was, prior to anything to do with education and technology, as in, say, from about 2002 forward, I'd had a life as an artist. I had a great time. I had a fantastic time. I loved doing artwork. It was fantastic. Paintings, just, printmaking, sculptural things, everything like that. I had a profound sort of time. It was great.
The tabletops. The tables that you made.
That's just one example of something I needed to reflect on in 2015. I think it was, yeah. That was a carving and I have a seeing eye that can translate to making things. I'm a maker, creator. But I realized that my time prior to being an educator prior to being an educational technologist, was working with the Ministry of Justice and the Juvenile Justice and Department of Community Services, which is like welfare, a whole range of different organisations I'd worked with prior. And I hadn't considered as to what it meant in terms of technological intervention at that time with that particular type of experience. So in 2014, it hit home for me to actually start to connect with research projects prior that had no research, no ethics council or clearance, were live on the internet and had occurred live into spaces and had colossally changed a whole community's life, not just one person's, but a whole community. And that's when I had this bright idea in 2004 of putting a camera on my body and mo-blogging live to the internet through an Aboriginal Australian community. And also handing the cameras out to kids and them taking photos and them going live as well and so on. I learned a lot from that experience. And I also learned that this technology that we are currently seeing around us and so on, and the technology that I'd been using is being used in actual fact was an extension of the surveillance state against these communities, and was largely marginalizing these communities further, and individuals within that community further. Which kind of brings me to the discussion chapter in the context of a research journey. You know, we have a methodology, you set out on your journey, you have some stakeholders, you interview them or, you know, survey them or in some way gather data, you then largely analyze that data, and then you, in some way, you've got to make sense of that, what it was that you did. So that sort of it took me up to there. And in that 2015 period, I found myself actually questioning myself in terms of my own integrity and ethics around who I was. So I did a series of things like write my entire life story, for some reason, completely live to the internet, which effectively cut off half of my family and probably about 95% of the people in Facebook, which I thought was fantastic, because it meant that all the people I didn't actually want to interact with, they could all piss off. And the people that I really wanted to communicate with about where I was at, where it actually journeyed to, were the people that still stayed there. And then largely there were people like you and a whole range of other people. And I was pleasantly surprised by that. Anyway, I wrote that publication, and I did a presentation like I'm doing now, live to a live audience, and kind of sort of paid penance for all the sort of things I had done from when I was a teenager right forward. I kind of caught up, I suppose. I caught up with myself in life, you know. And it's sometimes when you see a reflection of yourself and you think, yep, that used to be a narcissistic thing, and now it's actually really freaking me out. I better do something about that. So I did. I wrote my story, put it out there. And in doing that, it opened up a whole series of doors that I never thought it'd ever open up at all. It's also shut down the ones that I didn't want to be involved with anyway. And really, the discussion chapter takes into effect the philosophical nuances that I had been living through prior, and perhaps some of the more spiritual sides, I suppose, of what this technology might mean in an ethical context that is outside of the servitude of moral society. Moral society, as I saw it generally, was how we coalesce around an idea, and how, as in general, we have a specific series of rules that we engineer all together to largely officiate how we would interact with respect to that particular context. There's a series of laws and rules and so on that we are guided by, the morals of society. But I saw a lot of people stepping outside of those morals of society because they disagreed with those, because they didn't think that government served the people serving itself and so on. And I think a lot of the technological intervention we were seeing around us, including our identity being tracked, and this idea of drones that used to surveil people who now actually had cannons on them were killing people, and that they were killing people, and that nobody was actually controlling who was being killed by the drone itself. It's automated. I think when those things started we saw them happening in front of us. Once we saw that technology had taken on this so-called artificial intelligence, this genocidal framework, when we saw those things happening in that sort of 2010 period forward, we started to really step outside of our moral servitude and actually come up with some ethical decision making on our own. And a lot of people disappeared offline. They all became anonymous. Everybody became anonymous. You know, we all became the anonymous. And what we meant was, by becoming the anonymous, meant in actual fact that individually we did our own thing in our own way, and somehow that would connect with other people, and we would connect up with the right people, and we do. That's what happens. The idea is, in general, if you have an idea or concept that your instinct, the thing you feel inside yourself as you go through the day, if something feels wrong, it doesn't feel right, you generally change your course a little bit. So you don't get run over, or you don't put the key in the car because you thought, hang on a minute, no, I might go back and just check that the kids are okay inside. Things like that, that feeling side of it. Largely, that's the discussion chapter for me. But I didn't have a word for it. I didn't know how to describe that. My feeling changed my life in 2010 when I decided by instinct to change from socio-technical to socio-ethical. That was the big change. That's the big marker there. I decided instinctively that the socio-technical paradigm of efficiencies, profit-making, all the rest of it, was largely not what I wanted to look at primarily. It has to be considered. We run by it, but I wanted to look at the socio-ethical framework. And you go into Google, put in socio-ethical, whether you put a dash in the middle or as one word, go and try and find out what you can see in there about socio-ethical of anything. There's not much. There's very little, in fact. Put in socio-technical and go and have a look how far you can get on socio-technical. You will find reams and reams, and you will find generations and eons of things to do with technology across, particularly facilitated by the IEEE, of things related to how efficiencies and so on are largely orchestrated across the world. And that's what my interviews reflect in general. The analysis is privacy is dead, transparency is king. Essentially, each and individual person is starting to, with all of this technology around them, are starting to lose control of their instinct. Their instinctual self is distracted away from what they should and could be doing to affect change in other people. And largely that's because of this notion, and I agree with Noam Chomsky, I think it's science fiction. I know it's science fiction because it's actually written by science fiction writers. And I discovered in the interviews, this will come out in the thesis, science fiction writers hang out with engineers and they do it for a reason. Science fiction writers dream dreams and they drink drinks that are the drinks that they need to keep dreaming. And engineers hang out in the same bar with the science fiction writers drinking the same drink. The thing is that they try to make live, they try to bring into society what it is that these science fiction writers are dreaming. Now, a lot of that dystopic dreaming, in actual fact, is what's going to, through the singularity, break up communities, social sorting. That's this idea of social surveillance, not social media. Once we're sorted into different types of people and we're on our own little journeys, that's split up until essentially we're only individuals connecting with a corporation. That is the singularity. Singular. Nothing to do with community, nothing to do with humanity. So if engineers and science fiction writers want to dream these dystopic dreams and bring them into our reality, I had one picture there and it was just dystopia. And I remember sitting there, Vance, in 2015 and feeling absolutely and profoundly sad and empty, sitting down by the lake in Canberra, just sitting under a crack willow tree there and just feeling absolutely, just thinking, it's not about the PhD. I don't even feel bad about that anymore. It's not about work. It's not about life. I just feel sad about humanity itself. Is just going down the wrong route. You know, we're going the wrong way. And that's what for some reason or other, it's funny how things connect. Within a couple of days, those answers started to come to me as to what was missing. And it was around this little film, this tiny little film. It's very short. BBC brought it out a long time ago. And it's between two people. One is one of the world's leading physicists who is explaining atom fusion, about astrophysics, his journey as an astrophysicist, and what it meant with the Big Bang Theory and the universe within universes, stars outside of stars, and so on. And he met an old Nigana Aboriginal elder up in Broome. He so happened to go up there to escape the world, went for a walk down the beach, and something happened in his life, and he realized what was going on. And it was about the same conversations and exactly the same thing, except the dreaming is not by science fiction writers and engineers. It's not about science at all. It's about humanity. So if we look back and we start to connect with people who know their grandmother's grandmother, who know all of that, they know all of everything about their eons of past. When you listen to what they say, they talk about protecting country, this country, no matter where it is, the ground or where we are, and also how we speak our reality. If we speak about the singular, which is against community, if we speak about technological intervention of cyborgism that's going to take over being humans, if we keep talking this way, if we keep dreaming this way and keep talking this way, we will invent the end of humanity. It will be the end of the Anthropocene. Yeah, it will be the sixth extinction altogether. We will have invented our own extinction, and it will happen within 100 years. We can engineer that. It's possible for us to engineer our process, our life, this whole world, engineer it now so that our grandchildren never see their children. We could engineer that just by what we're speaking at this present moment. And if we look at all the ecocide that's happening across this world, and we connect that with the technological singularity on corporations that largely lead mining magnates that actually drive mining trucks that are 100% automated with no human drivers in them, extracting stuff at a massive rate, which is completely unsustainable, what are we creating? We're creating a singularity that will be the end of humanity, and what the singularitarians would have us believe is going to be the best onset of humanity that there is. A very, very few who have a very, very lot of the rest of the world under control the way that they want it to have happen. So that's the discussion chapter. And in conclusion, I largely haven't got to that part because there's still a lot of those aspects of those interviews, including yours, Vance, that I need to revisit, and some of those that I need to return in such a way that I can connect the dots through to everything I've read as well. There's a massive amount of theory that I've had to bring into that ethnographic study. And the technological process of that journey has been interesting too, because I've gone from scanning a zillion tools to try and make this work and make it quicker and all the rest of it, and all it's done is actually made it slower. And the biggest tool of all that I've found through the whole lot of them was just in listening. And that was taught to me by a number of individuals who said we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should be, in general, listening twice as much as we are speaking. So I did that. This is an opportunity where I'm talking twice as much as I'm listening, but I actually started to listen carefully into those interviews, look for links between the key themes within those interviews, and then look at the core ideas around what instinct it is that those individuals have. And each and every one of them, when you get back down to question 8, 9, or 10, talk about, what's the future of humanity with its technology and so on. When you start to switch across to that socio-ethical domain, in large, they all point the same way, pretty much. They say, yeah, we have a great deal of fear around where this is taking us. Yeah, there's some great aspects to the tools we use, but there's also a great deal of dystopia around us, and it's largely not controlled by us individually, but by a whole range of other people who want to remain unseen. So I've had to hand transcribe all of those interviews. I've been to an international conference, I think, about every 3 months in the whole process. I've published in lead journals. I've produced a whole heap of stuff, a whole heap of data and things. I've actually been creative through the whole process as well, of writing and listening. But the outputs of the PhD itself are still in that flux period, and this is what this last 6 to 8 months is about, Vance. The answers are fairly evident from what I said a moment ago. But I think that I still am at this wonderful kind of point where I don't know what the key final outcomes might be. But it might be something like this. It might be just something like this. In the beginning, I thought the null hypothesis was that, from an engineering perspective, that say you have a statement, right, that's true. Through history, technological innovation has advanced humanity. Okay? Well, it has. I mean, I don't know if you have a cochlear implant or a heart implant or some other device. In general, through history, technological innovations advanced humanity. And that's an example of that. And then if you have, say, another statement, it's kind of a subset of that main statement. that the location-enabled wearable digital glass technologies are a result of that technological innovation. They came from the same place. Like the people who invented the heart pacemaker and the cochlear implant and the embedded new shoulder and new knee, well, it largely came pretty much from places like MIT. So if location-enabled wearable digital glass technologies are a result of that technological innovation, therefore, the deduction is, since the first one is true, and the second one we kind of are thinking is true, by deduction, we're going to say, this is what I started with. I came out with, at the very beginning, wearable digital glass technologies will advance humanity. That's what I came out with. That was my very first pure mathematics deduction under a null hypothesis. That's what I put forward. The null hypothesis being that wearable digital glass technologies will advance humanity. Now here I am at the conclusion of that process 6 years later, of that research. If I was to rewrite that hypothesis, I'd have to take into effect and into consideration where we're at with this singularity notion and to how many people are subscribing to it. Because we even have singularitarian Mormon groups. The Church of Scientology has a singularity wing. There's a whole range of organizations that have bought into this idea that technology, is actually a religion. In actual fact, it's a belief that if the technological singularity is an event or a sequence, and it's going to occur perhaps at the birth of artificial intelligence, well, we've already been past that. When artificial intelligence surpasses or takes over our biological context, human intelligence, when it takes over human intelligence, that somehow that's going to mean that we have arrived as a human? I think this is completely wrong.
Technology has arrived.
Yeah, that's right. All that's arrived is the same technologies that we've always been using all the time. So when you look on the other domain, it's like 3 layers. You look at what First Nations people say. They say, no, technology is a tool. It's how you use it. You can write with a pencil or you can stab somebody with it. It's up to you. The choice is yours. You've got the choice to do what you want to do with the tool, but don't start worshipping the tool, because the tool is just something to do something with through time. It's just a tool. That's all it is. So I have to be very careful as a researcher to sort of pitch at the end that perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps wearable digital technology is
a journey. You have to change in a journey.
That's
you can't just stay on the same journey. The journey changes you.
It does.
It has, and you've really very cogently articulated that journey. It's very interesting. I like the way you brought it to the null hypotheses on country, cyborgs, and the singularity. I mean, I didn't understand that title, but you explained it very well in a nice monologue, which I was very happy to listen to because I have 2 ears, and we're learning together. That's how we.
And that's nigaligara, which means you've got to listen, and that's the context as to what I've been imbued with, this amazing experience to be actually connected with people who were enslaved by technology. I mean, I don't mean just enslaved by technology in the context of going down the shop and buying something and getting distracted by it. I mean, they were enslaved by technology such as a shearing, like to shear a sheep. So therefore, people came onto their country and started to introduce these fat woolly things that had to be shorn with a tool. And they became the slave to this fat woolly thing and having to actually do all the fleecing and all the rest of it. They became a slave to that. So they've seen repeated intervention of technologies that non-Aboriginal people have brought onto their country. And this is the notion of on country. That's where not on the country, on country, meaning on this land of where they are. When we bring technologies into this context of on country, we're enslaving people by bringing it onto the country. And one of those, Vance, as a classic example for you, and where the conclusion will sit, and short papers that I will continue to write in this context are, when you put a GIS ankle tag which monitors the blood type and system of an Aboriginal individual, and you geofence them into one location which they're not from that area, they're from another area, you essentially are creating a genocide. You are incarcerating people by using technology in a way that produces incarceration. Because if that individual steps out of that geofence with that ankle tag on, they're essentially put into a torture chamber. Now, I've just come back from Broome a couple of days ago. That's why I'm looking so shockingly tired. Broome, it's winter there, right? Heart of winter. It's 35 degrees in the heart of winter. In the heart of summer, sometimes it gets up to 55 degrees, and I'm sure that you've experienced that before. And in a 55-degree context with no air conditioning and no running water, people are being incarcerated in this country in numerous locations in cells that would have to be 60 or 70 degree heat. They're dying in there at a rapid rate. And in the Northern Territory alone, the statistics are, as we interviewed a person, Jerry Georgiadis recently, a human rights campaigner, some of the statistics are, it's 95% of the population of young juvenile people are in those incarceration units. They're not out in the community. And the ones that are out there are ankle tagged. And the ones that are back in there are because they're ankle tagged and they broke it and they're back in again. Now, what we have to do here, we have to step outside of our societal moral boundaries and ethically as an individual say something about it. And that's where it comes to in the conclusion within my PhD. These technologies that we have largely facilitated under this subset of Q and deduction P and Q, wearable digital glass, let's just take out the wearable digital glass for a minute. Let's put in there GIS facilitated location enabled technologies. I have covered that. I've covered that right through the whole PhD. I looked at the Momoto camera, I looked at the Tazar cam, I looked at every known different device type that there was. And these are location-enabled technologies, and I see them not advancing humanity. So what we have to largely say here is, and there's a lot of First Nation people here, and what I've learned up there, the key word for it is, if I have a child, my own children are, this is what's happening to me as an individual. My instinct, my gut feel is that I'm losing my children, Vance. In actual fact, in some cases, I've lost my children. Because they've been lost to a screen where they put their finger on it and they run through a digital matrix that's got far more involved and far more excitement than anything that exists in their real world. And when we take their finger off that and we remove that device, we watch our children go into different states of breakdown, emotional breakdown, a physiological breakdown, a manifestation of all sorts of things that go wrong with children when we take this technology away. And then we put the technology back in their hand again, and they're happy again, and they're interacting again. And they've become addicted to this technology. I've seen the addiction occur with my kids, and I've seen the addiction occur with other people's children and other people and humans and so on, and I was one of those addicted people. Very, very addicted to technology. The allure of building things in Second Life, connecting through mobile frameworks, all of that has been incredibly addictive for me as an individual. And that's been part of this journey. And I admit to that. So what I'm thinking is, if we take this currently handheld device and we strap it to our head, to our body so that it doesn't disattach, when we start attaching devices and these sorts of technologies, it is the conclusion for the PhD for me. The final conclusion for me in the nature of the PhD is the beginning, perhaps, I think, Vance, of something I learned about back in 2009. My greatest fear would be if somebody said to me, we are going to embed a technology inside you that is going to monitor a whole range of things about you and you do not have a choice about having that technology inside you. And guess what? Our society is not far away from that. Our societies are starting to mobilize towards the state of ubervalence or urbivalence. Now, that's where my PhD largely ends. That's where my thesis wraps up, because in order to take on embedded technologies and to take on all of that would mean I'd need to do another PhD. I would need to start looking at and interviewing and engaging with people around embedded technologies and so on. And that's one of the findings of the interviews. Many people in the interviews have discussed the fact that the things that they fear most is the fact that they think the very technologies that they know are handheld or wearable at this moment will become embeddable. That's the trajectory of where technology is heading. And if that's the case, I have an ethical revulsion at this notion that technologies and the onset for my kids and their kids, that the technologies of the corporations that are creating them will be inside them. For me, I just see that's the end of a certain type of humanity. I see that as the end of a certain type of relatedness with each other. And the biggest thing of all, I think I know what it is. My gut feel tells me that it's wrong. And in an Aboriginal word, my lian, my instinct, tells me this is the wrong way to go. If that's telling me, having looked at this for quite some time, decades, that this is wrong, it's my responsibility to actually inform why it's wrong. And that is around the fact that when we become singular, we lose community. When we lose community and connection with each other, we largely lose our ability to survive. And I think that's where my PhD conclusion sits at this point in time. That's where it sits at this point in time. And I'll be interested to know if in half a year it's changed. I don't think it will. And that's where things are at, Vance, with the PhD. That's why I brought those three things in there. What on country means. First Nations people will see this through too. They've seen many, many, many other races of people come and go. The human race hopefully will survive this one as well. Cyborgs, well, essentially, if we become embedded with the technology that we're already holding in our hand, we become cyborgs, and I think we already are. I feel a bit like a cyborg. I feel like this controls a lot of my life. This omniscient, all-seeing network is good in connecting with other people at certain times like you and I are, but I think that it actually has been affecting my mental health as well. The amount of nodes, networks, people, things going on from different domains, and because I'm so invested in so many wonderful things and because I'm so curious, I think that it actually has an impact on me as an individual. I'm fairly resilient. You know, I've been a pretty resilient character. Heaven forbid the people are not resilient. We're seeing so many cases of technologically facilitated depression, I think, as a result of this stuff, wearable and handheld. If we take that and we implant that, and everything becomes the internet in relation to us, screens, cars, locks, all the rest of it, if that's all how we're going to interact with the world, some of us, not all of us, then I think that we're going to start to see people as a cyborg unit start to subset away from people that aren't directly. And in terms of the singularity, I think this is all of the manifestations of a dystopia that's actually a science fiction, and it's actually corporation-led, and it's greedy, and I don't think that it advances humanity whatsoever.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things. One, well, embedded, implanted. I'm thinking of microchips on animals, for example. That's an example of a valent embedded technology. But I think most of us have a choice. There are people, you mentioned, for example, the Aboriginal people who have wearing these ankle tags. That's not a choice.
Not by choice.
So, no. So there are certainly, there's a danger that someone will be implanted, through legal means or whatever, or quasi-legal, but anyway, still, most of us have a choice, and also there's the other thing, that the connection, that really underpins our work, our relationship, as we mentioned earlier. When you said earlier that most of your friends were online friends. And in a way, it's the same with me. I really appreciate my online world. I like to meet people, and I like to interact in it. Like something I encountered yesterday, we went diving around some fishermen, and there were fish floating in the water. When we went diving, we found all these fish on the bottom of the water. And, they had been dynamiting or poisoning them. I'm not sure what they were doing. But anyway, we took pictures. Okay, so that was yesterday. They haven't gone on Facebook yet, but when I stop here, I'm going to put this on Facebook. And this is another thing that it's not the ability of being able to connect these things, to be surveilling others, and also what you're doing, you're going out to, this is something I don't know, I know you need to go to bed probably, but you're going off to the Aboriginal territories and coming back and reporting. You've put this online. I put a link in the chat wing to the one that you gave me to, it's in there somewhere, figshare.com.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Alexander. Okay.
Yeah.
And the link I put in there has a lot of your papers there. So I haven't had a chance. You just gave it to me an hour ago, but
earlier, yeah.
I think that's a place that we can go to look at your papers. Is that correct?
That's right.
And
it is.
The last one, and one that you showed us on the plane on Facebook as you were coming back, about what you had been doing in the, and we were talking about deadly glass earlier, which is just something I'm aware of because it was a Google community you showed me, and I understood that.
Well, let's look at that.
Glass.
Yeah, let's discuss that deadly glass initiative. What occurred there was, I met a young Darug woman here. The Darug people are part of the Eora Nation in Sydney, and this individual turned up to a conference. Now, I was the keynote speaker with glass on my podium, and with her was a young woman who was a brilliant cancer genomics expert. And the two of them had this consultation company that were visiting Aboriginal communities and listening to what it was that they principally wanted to see happen within the community. And it made sense, deal with the nature of dysfunctionality from the way that governments intervene on the community, and also prevent the genocide that's happening in relation to the young people who are being incarcerated and things like that. And also looking at good initiatives as to how to get past that. Restorative justice, returning things back to Aboriginal people instead of just taking them away, things like that. And I got talking with her, and she said, "Oh, can I try the glass on?" And I said, "Well, you can. It's like any other tool. But largely, you'd be the very first person I know of as an Aboriginal woman that would be wearing glass. What does that mean for your nation of people?" So she put it on and decided to take the glass unit back to the elders in South Australia, where one of her colleagues were, and present this device to them in a way that would explain a new tool. This is a tool that's being used by, and it comes from Google, and it does this, that, and the other. So she got on the plane, got off in Adelaide, in the hotel room, this, that, and the other, then out on country, known as out on country, not the country, but on country, with elder people who looked at the device. And she realized that when she went back online, there was a whole series of photos and videos and information online that she had not given permission to be online at all. In fact, the glass unit had been sniffing out Wi-Fi and sneaking the photos that were on there out and publishing them live via a G Plus feed that she hadn't given permission for. Now, the complexities of the actual unit to actually turn the things on and off in terms of where you send things or don't send things at the time was still not largely in place. The fact that it was sniffing out Wi-Fi routers and actually connecting randomly as it went was an indicator in its own right around the technology and its design, user interface. The tool was just considered to be another tool, but the elder people ignored the tool and said, we'd like to meet with Google right here, and welcome them to come here and have a chat with us about what they've been doing with their maps in relation to our sacred sites, which are over here, here, and here, that everybody knows now and have been desecrating as a result of this information being made live on the internet. Another paradox. And so it went on. And there were numerous examples as to where this this range of technologies had interceded on their life. And one of the ones that really struck me, and it probably was the pinnacle of me not interacting in that environment any further, was when that young woman said, do you know anything about the where they measure the skull? It's a tool that they used to put on people's heads and measure the circumference and the diameter and all the rest of it of a human skull in various points. I can't think of what that device type's called. And anyway, that she showed me one of them. And she said, do you understand that this technology is just one of those? It's just technological now? And I said, well, yeah. I mean, it does. It measures everything about the individual and, you know, when they tip their head or how, or what they're looking at, their emotions, whether they're passing through one Wi-Fi place or another, or, you know, and I had to question in my own mind, her premise being that the devices themselves are an old tool. They're a tool of a genocidal tool, a tool that's actually being used another level of intervention in these people's lives. Now, you've got to remember that some of these people live in houses distributed by the Department of Housing that have got surveillance cameras in every room. Where is the privacy? You know, like, and so on. So I had to take it on the chin that the interaction I thought we would have, in actual fact, was quite contrary to that, and I had to own up to that. And I had to answer to people offline as to why it was that I was and had in some way maybe facilitated something that had actually gone wrong in relation to that people and maybe have caused great shame to that individual. And I largely had no answers for that. I wasn't in control of the device and where it was coming, going, turning on, off, nothing. I was not in control. So the thing about it is, that's the key to it, Vance, and you said it earlier, we are privileged with choice, you and I. We can choose to do this, yeah? We can turn things on and off. We've got a switch that we can turn it on and off. We are the privileged few who have control of a switch that can turn the network on and off. And do you know what I've done repeatedly? I've repeatedly killed my Facebook account. And do you know why? Why do I kill my Facebook account? Because I can. And every time I do further research by doing it. I capture all of the interaction from the people in Facebook Messenger who say to me, Alex, have I done something wrong? Did I offend you? Why did you cut me off? Is it okay? Can you please contact me and explain why it would be that you would not contact me in Facebook? And I look and I think the same thing happened when I killed the account, you know, earlier and earlier and earlier. I think that what's actually happening is that people are becoming so integrated and so addicted to this device. I'm watching people put up there. John, can you put the kettle on for a minute? It's become a mechanism or phone to individuals within their own household as to what's actually happening. Full-blown fights, sexual harassment disclosures, racism. I'm watching the whole lot. I use the tool as a mechanism to see how other people interact with me about an issue, you know? And so what it is, I think what we have to do, we've got to be mindful of that, Vance, is When is it in our instinct that we can't turn something off? What would happen to you if you completely killed your Facebook account, deactivated it, and did not log in that month's time at all ever again? Would your life stop?
Well, your Facebook account would probably continue somewhere.
It does. It continues to keep monitoring everything you do because your phone has still got all the framework of Facebook imbued in the actual user interface of it. Okay, so your Facebook account, however, is a major conduit to the way that we communicate with other people. However, when you ask 98% of the people who use Facebook, as an example, just Facebook as an example, it's not just Facebook, it's Snapchat and all the rest of them as well. When you say to them, if you don't use it any further, what's going to happen to your emotional self, your instinct? And they all say the same thing. It's fascinating. I would feel fearful. I don't think I'd actually cope. Yeah, what's going on? What am I going to do every 10 minutes? I'm feeling nervous. I don't have any phone contacts left in my phone. And so what I'm saying there, what I'm giving an example of, Vance, is that we largely have to be, we really have to think carefully now and deeply about how embedded these social surveillance tools are now embedded in our psyche as a humanity and society. That is the nature of the next level of my research and where I'm heading. That's where I'm going with that part. I'm looking at the philosophical nuances as that we have as individuals in what you said: choice, freedom. If our access, if the axis, you know, the axis of access, the axis of access is cut.
Okay.
If we start to break off nodes and we start to, if we do this, we start to tip over that way, then we've started to really reach past Web3. That's when we're in the singularity land, in the cyborg rules type of territory. Meaning that if we can't turn something off, like kill our Facebook account and it doesn't matter, that's when we're starting to actually become part of the machinery itself, where our minds have connected into machinery. Yeah, we connect and so on, but we're losing the ability to go out and enjoy the sunshine. Some people would say. We're starting to lose contact with our own present reality. So
yeah, I'm fortunate because I grew up in an era where we didn't have this connectivity, so it's come to me late in life. And so it really is remarkable how we used to interact, like in my adult life. I don't know. I went on a long trip and I happened to meet my wife in Rome, but we couldn't Facebook each other. She had to write me post restant, and we had to sort of plan ahead to actually come together on the same day. But and from that, that's where we traveled together. We got married eventually. So, but also just meeting her at the supermarket. You know, you used to have to plan when you would meet people and where, and there were all kinds of
that's it.
But
you had a spoken word that you followed.
and not only that, we would go to the beach and go camping and just take a sailboat out for days, you know, and not worry about things. And of course, or another good example, you write a paper, a very important something, and you put it in an envelope and you lick it and you put a stamp on it and send it off and forget about it for 2 or 3 weeks. Nobody's going to get back to you in that time.
Well, so we didn't need this instantaneous interaction with other people. No. And it's fascinating. I was born in the era where I said I sent a photo recently back to my daughter. I send things now from, I've had a life log as long as I've been moblogging and life logging, as long as I've had a camera in my hand. It's a private life log. I have tens of thousands. There's more. I've almost reached my terabyte limit within Flickr of images of people through time. And sometimes I send them back an image of them. My daughter I sent back the other day on her 18th birthday. She's sitting there back on a little flip Samsung phone back in 2002, I think it was, playing a game, and the phone is almost bigger than her whole hands. And I said, do you, in like my message for her 18th birthday, do you remember when the internet was not connected? And she came back and she said, who is that? And I said, that's you, 2002. And I said, and the internet was connected a long time prior to that. But do you remember the internet never being connected? And she said, oh, Dad, what are you talking about? And I said, well, look at this. We can interact on a live basis like this. In the past, I would have sent you a card. You're in another state, so therefore I would have worried about you. I'd be worried for your well-being. I would have sent you copious amounts of cards and letters, and I'd be in a present state of, you know. But at the moment, I can tell that you're pretty cool because you're down the block, and I say, are you okay? And you say, yeah. And then you go to another place and you say, hey, look at this, Dad. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
our
sure.
lives have changed incrementally and fantastically in some ways. The same way, though, I've also watched other people and also my children shut me out of the aspects of their life that perhaps in the past children would have revealed to their parents and said how they're feeling or how they're progressing or so on. I see that they have the power of also turning things off. They have that choice of not doing that, and I think that's because of the technology itself. And I do remember writing letters and not worrying about them. I actually remember, Vance, going down to the Photoshop and taking 24 photos and finding out that only 18 of them had worked, and the actual fact, you know, about 6 of them were really good. And now I look at my phone and it says, do you wish to import these photos? And I look down and I think, yes, okay. Do you wish to import 18,370 photos? I'm going, did I take 18,370 photos in 2 months? That's ridiculous. You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, things have changed markedly.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Well, Alex, I know that you need to get to bed probably. So
yeah, it's 11:45. Yeah, we should wrap this up.
Yeah. It's really nice to talk to you.
It's fantastic to connect with you again, Vance, as always. I mean,
I really enjoyed listening to your story about how you put this PhD together chapter by chapter, and that was a wonderful encapsulation. And it actually led to the title, which was the punchline.
That's the punchline. That's it. We can't afford to go to a singularity at all. But at the same time, perhaps we also have to consider that those technicians and those engineers that invented the singularity were the same people that also helped a lot of people and saved a lot of lives. We live in a big grey land, and that's what the researcher does. They have to get that sieve and work out where the gold goes and where the dirt goes. You've got to work out what is the good parts and which parts are going to intercede in society. And our role as researchers is actually to guide those engineers in some way. How do you build ethics into a drone that's killing people automatically without any concourse? How do we design in ethics into the way that engineers work? Now, that's where we're at. It's a very, very hard sort of challenge, but I'm prepared to take it on until the day I don't breathe another minute, because we need to. It's important.
Yeah, I can't wait to read your book.
That's it. It'll be a big, thick one, but more importantly, a lot of the data will be online. With links in there that work.
I mean, what you just talked about could be a book, a really interesting book with, leading to a conclusion that would take a reader through a thought process and drop in exactly where you want him to go or want him to be.
And that's what it will be, Vance. That's the idea. I've got an amazing supervisor who's given me the license to take it where I want to be. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I look forward to our next chat.
Absolutely. Let's not make it so long between drinks, as they say.
Yeah.
And my regards to your wide and amazing network. And in time, I will get there and I'll swim amongst those dead fish that they've just bombed or poisoned or whatever they did.
It'll be on Facebook tonight.
It'll be on Facebook tonight because you don't want to be. See, you're stepping outside your the moral domain, which would be to go to the authorities and leave it with them.
I think that's the way to go to them. You put it on Facebook, and then
they go back to them.
That's where they'll see it. You know.
That's because your camera is location enabled.
Yeah.
And you're wearing it.
It was a GoPro. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think it's location enabled.
No.
The location is known and given.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Vance.
We're talking to Alexander Hayes, the 345th first episode of Learning Together on August 14th, 2016. And Alex has come to us through many episodes, beginning with number 3. Man,
That's right.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Take care, Vance. See
Have
you
a nice
soon.
night. Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.